Welcome to Nancy Wilson's Femina Podcast. This audio is brought to you by Canon Press.
Welcome to the Femina Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. This is Nancy Wilson. Today I want to look at a verse in Nehemiah. You remember that the faithful Jews were trying to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem that had been destroyed, and they were trying to do this in the midst of their adversaries. And they prayed to God, and they built the wall because the people had a mind to work. But there were so many hindrances. And not only did they have Sanballat and his gang making fun of them and mocking them, threatening to kill them, and conspiring about how to hinder the work. Meanwhile, faithful Nehemiah was praying to God and setting up a watch day and night along the wall to keep an eye out for their adversaries. He had an immense job, a God-ordained job nonetheless, and much work was required. Thus, it met with much resistance. But not only did Nehemiah meet with stiff resistance on the outside from his adversaries, he found another kind of resistance within his own men. In chapter 4, verse 10, one of his chief men, Judah, gets discouraged himself, and he says this: "The strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall." So I want to talk about this comment of Judah's, there's much rubbish. The men were in the midst of rubble. The whole thing had been broken down. And so before they could rebuild, they had to clear out a whole lot of rubbish. And the strength of the men, he says, was decayed. They were exhausted. They had been working. And just imagine the heavy lifting required to clear out all that rubbish, because the rubbish was just rocks like that the wall had been built out of. So Judah was ready to give up. And so he is telling Nehemiah, it's like, this isn't going to work very well. And this must have been a real downer for Nehemiah. You can imagine, because he's got all this other resistance, and then to have some of his own people feel like giving up must have been hard to bear. But let's see how Nehemiah handles this. He just presses right on. If you read the next verse, he's just pressing right on. It's almost like he ignored the comment. And the thing I want you to think about, though, today is the rubbish. I'm going to talk to you about rubbish. And I want you to think about what God has called you to be doing and what part of the wall He has assigned for you to rebuild. Is there way too much rubbish? Are you ready to give up? Is your strength decayed? And we see that in spite of Judah's discouraging words, Nehemiah persevered. He just divided up his men, and they worked with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other, which would be very complicated. I just cannot imagine. But let's leave the wall around Jerusalem and talk about your wall. Are you feeling like your strength is decayed and there's too much rubble in the job that God has given you? Do you look at the sticky floor after the weekend, or the piles of laundry, or the homework load, or the homeschooling responsibilities, or the job list, and just feel like there's too much rubbish standing between you and getting your work done? Is your strength decayed? Maybe one of your own dear friends or family members is telling you that it's impossible, or it's not worthwhile, or it's never going to happen. There's just too much rubbish. And so I want to address that attitude. And what are we supposed to do when there is too much rubbish and the job is too big? Just remember, first of all, women, we're made for work. We were not created for idleness and self-entertainment and self-fulfillment. We're made to work. So let's see if we can figure out just what the rubbish is that's standing between us and the work God has assigned for us to do. What is your job? And all of you, have different jobs. We all have different responsibilities, and things change. Sometimes when we just get it dialed in and we've got it working like, perfectly, or so we think, and then God changes up our job a little bit, and we have to adjust. So sometimes I think the rubbish that comes between us and our work is a bad, sad attitude, because attitudes truly are rubbish, bad attitudes. If you've been listening to yourself complain, that's rubbish. That's rubbish that's getting in the way. If you're envying your friend who you think has a more glamorous job or more friends or an easier life, that's rubbish. And if you are just too tired, your strength is decayed. What are you supposed to do about that? Is it just too much? Do you feel like you've been given a job that's just not realistic? Or you don't have the gifts for this job you've been assigned? Are you looking too much at your own resources and feeling like it's just not enough for the job you've been given? Let's roll up our sleeves, ladies, and think about this. What is it God has given us to do? And what is it that is hindering us and getting in our way and getting us down and getting us discouraged? And let's just clear away the rubbish, shall we? All good work will be met with stiff resistance. Let me say that again. All good work will always be met with stiff resistance. Either resistance in your own heart, from your own team, or from your adversaries. And we don't want to be our own adversaries. We don't want our own hearts to be the source of all of the resistance. So let's start there first. Let's confess any bad attitudes and complaining spirits and realize we are hindering ourselves. And think about it. If it wasn't a good work, why would our adversaries care about bothering us about it? If it is a good work, after all, of course there's going to be resistance. Why does the world spend so much time telling us that homemaking is a stupid job and a worthless occupation? Why do they do that? Because they know it's the most potent job on earth. That's why there's so much resistance. That's why there are all these campaigns telling women to leave their kids and go get a job, go work anywhere, just get out of the house, that the house is not fulfilling and so forth. It's like, listen, raising children and making a home is hard work. And there will always be resistance. So let's at least get all the resistance out of our own hearts taken care of. Let's clear that rubbish away. So ask God to show you what rubbish is keeping you from doing the building. What rubbish is discouraging you and making you feel like it's never going to get done, or making you feel like it's not worthwhile, that you just can't do it. And then ask God to help you clear that away. Often it's our own perspective that has created a lot of the rubbish, maybe not all of it, but confess that. Confess any bad attitudes or just cowardice or envy. And then you can ask God to give you a fresh perspective on what He has lovingly called you to do. Let's clear out the rubbish. Let's thank God for the piles. And then we can get back to work. I've told you the story once before, but it bears repeating right now. But I remember asking my mother-in-law one time for a little encouragement because I did feel like I was just getting out my shovel every morning and digging away at this big pile and making a little progress, but the next morning there it was all back again. And so rather than cheering me up or feeling sorry for me, she told me about a missionary who was hung by his heels in a cave and how his wife would come and bring him his, books and reading materials and writing materials and food and minister to him in that condition. And that was all she had for me. That was it. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. It's like, Nancy, you are listening to rubbish. Get to work, roll up your sleeves. God's given you such a good job to do. Rejoice in it. And don't grow weary of it. And don't let the adversaries in your own heart and outside get you down. So once we take heart and we can get right back to work. And Nehemiah got that wall done. And all those men were faithful and just kept at it. They cleared away the rubbish and they got the wall built. And God protected them from their enemies. It's a great story. So, thanks for joining me today. Go get the rubbish.